Money Heist Season 5 Part 1 is out, and it is just... wow, there is a lot to talk about. I've configured kind of my own overall opinion on the season, and I want to share that all with you. Money Heist is one of my favorite shows ever. I mean, I just love it to death. So when Season 5 Part 1 came out, I thought I have to make a review to this. I want to just make a video of it regardless if people watch it or not. One of the biggest things that you notice with Season 5 Part 1 is that the entire show seems to take a little bit of a different direction and try something a lot new, and I'm going to sort of get into that as I keep going, but that's the main point I want to get across, is that they are trying something new. Episode 1. If they wanted to raise the stakes, well, they did it. I mean, holy crap. This episode, and I think all of the episodes, start with a really very cool montage, and episode 1 starts with a cool montage of some things that happened in the past in previous episodes, and this is just a really cool way to start the show, and you get to see a really cool walk by Alicia. The show starts off right away flipping its entire premise on its heads, because the professor is caught, and usually, the professor has a way out of things, a plan B, and I think Raquel says it best.
No hay plan B, porque solo es posible plan A.
Yeah, there is no plan B. I thought the professor was going to be out of, kind of MIA for most of this season, just like Raquel was in Season 4, and for the most part, I was right. When the professor said sorry to each of the characters individually, it just felt really sad because he always has a plan, and I like this. A central theme of the show is that the characters let love take them, and they start acting with their hearts instead of their brains, and then the plan goes haywire and everything goes off kill, and it's the professor's job to get everyone back on track. I like this because now it's the gang's mission to get themselves back on track, right? Like, they need to initiate the plan themselves without the professor, which is very, very cool and something very, very new. The professor's been caught before, but he had something on his side. Love, right? And this time, he doesn't. The shots of Berlin and his son in the city are some of the coolest of the show. I really love the cinematography and that whole sort of flashback side plot. I can't help but think that Berlin's son is just kind of thrown in there out of nowhere. I mean, he's never been mentioned. And it's a little off-putting, but I'm sure the writers have a good reason for him. The music this episode is very good. I immediately thought that the music was taken up a notch from seasons 1 through 4. They really tried some new things out, most notably with the classical music when they're kind of chasing the red car on that road. The classical music is just so very cool, and it's very new, and I love it a lot. All the music is just increased this season. Other than that, I mean, the episode was honestly a little bit slow. I mean, they spent a lot of the time taking out a helicopter just for them not to catch anyone, and we spent a lot of time in some backstories, which we spend a lot of time in every episode, and I'll talk about that later, but it was a little bit slow, though it is a great setup. A lot of, some new characters are introduced, some new ideas are introduced. I'm not sure how I felt about those at the time, but I was definitely intrigued, and I gave the opening season overall a weak 6. Episode 2 is, holy crap, it is a grandioso episode. I mean, we have never seen Arturo like this. I don't even know if that's how you say his name, but I don't think we've ever seen him like this, right? I mean, never. The action and the shooting and the drama in this episode was just so crazy. I mean, the shootout between Arturo and the gang, mainly Arturo and Denver, was just something off the charts. I mean, this is only rivaled by Berlin's, final escape in Season 2, and maybe Gandia's escape in that one hallway, but, I would have to say that this episode takes the cake, in my opinion. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat. My heart was pumping the entire way through. I've never seen something like this in Money Heist, and as soon as Arturo started yelling at Denver and Denver started yelling back, I mean, it was just amazing. It was crazy. It was off the charts. Whoever wrote this is a freaking genius. A lot of times in action films, you get a lot of shooting and punching and kicking and flips, but you never really get that emotional feeling. And for the yelling and the arguing to almost bring a tear to you while all these guns blazing is going on is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's so good. I freaking loved it. And then Stockholm got her weapon and started crawling through the vents, and it's like, Stockholm really loves Denver. Holy crap. Like, you know, looking at her season 1, you would never expect this from her. So for her to, you know, kind of take on this arc and be so in love, it's just so cool. And I almost thought Arturo was going to get away. I mean, he almost like surrendered. I mean, Stockholm hesitated, and then she shot him, and I was actually wishing Arturo died, but it looks like he's going to pull through. I mean, we don't know for sure, but the fact that he didn't die right then and there makes me think that he's going to pull through, because if they were going to kill him, they should have just killed him there. The episode almost even changed genders to like, not genders, it almost changed genres to like a horror film when Marseille, however you say his name, and Benjamin walked into the professor's lair, and they think the professor's asleep, but you know Alicia is hiding there, and you don't know when she's gonna come out, and it was just very cool. It was almost like I was watching a horror movie, which I was not. The music! Holy crap! The music was so good. I mean, I knew the music was increased this season from episode 1, but once you get to episode 2, you just realize that the music is something else. It's off the charts. I mean, the music makes this episode. It's also been a while since the hostages were actually a vital part of the show, so for them to have a whole rebellion, even if it's led by Arturo, is so cool. I mean, all of season 4, I was like, where are the hostages? Like, they should be playing a part, you know? So, very cool to see that. The suspense has never been higher, and times have never been tougher, and, you know, overall, I actually gave this episode a decent 10 out of 10. Honestly, really, like, this episode goes above and beyond. There's not many places I can see this episode getting better, which is why I gave it a decent 10 out of 10. Episode 3. The ending montage in episode 3 is actually phenomenal. I mean, between Alicia giving birth and the gang all getting into position and the army going to blow up the roof, it is just something off the charts. It is so well written and acted, and it's also so well edited. I mean, whoever edited this episode, or the team of editors, really did a really great job. This episode focused a lot on backstories, and it's this episode that I sort of started to realize that this season's going to focus a lot on backstories, and some of them I think are a little bit out of place. Denver and his father's backstory about taking care of Benjamin's daughter, and Tokyo's past relationship with her boyfriend, and Berlin's, you know, new heist that he's pulling off with his son, like, they seem kind of out of place, and it's like, why am I watching this, you know? And it's like, I like seeing it, I like seeing all these backstories, but like, why? If there's gonna be a point to them in part 2, I would like to see kind of a point in part 1, because now part 1's done, I'm kind of just sitting there like, okay, but why did I watch this entire heist with Berlin and his son? I mean, what was the point? Oh, I'm about to run out of battery. Alright, I'll have to finish this filming this later. It's later. I think the professor, he kind of went back to his roots this episode. He used kind of his dialogue and his careful wordplay to get out of his trap, and he also meant what he was saying. He really cared for Alicia, and he really just wanted to birth that baby, and after the baby was birthed, he didn't like go and like lock up Alicia or anything. He just went back to his plan, and he even sent Marseille, however the heck you say his name, to go get stuff for the baby, you know? So you can tell he actually cared about Alicia, and that's why I think Alicia now is taking the role of Raquel from season 2. I mean, the government has totally skewed Alicia's name, so it would not be surprised if she switches sides. Overall, I ended up giving this episode a decent to strong 8. Episode 4 reminded me a lot of episode 2. There's a lot of shooting and action and blood. It was this episode where I kind of realized something in the show. You know, well, I had realized it before, but it was solidified to me that the show was going in a very different direction. You know, it used to be about meticulous planning and using all these different skills and like tactics to evade the police, and now it's just like shooting and, oh, the military is storming us, go fight back, you know, which isn't bad per se. I mean, I actually think a lot of the action scenes are some of the best of the entire show. It's different and it's good. It's just, like I said, different. This episode was 51 minutes long, and 15 of those minutes were spent watching the heist that Berlin and his son pull off, and honestly, the scene was phenomenal. I mean, the shots were beautiful, the pacing was amazing, and the just general idea of the heist is so well. I mean, it really brings the show back to its roots and gives us some of that awesome, meticulous planning, awesome, sort of heists that, made the fans fall in love with the show. And I actually enjoyed watching it, but with this background, with this backstory, even though I liked it, there were some things that I couldn't really brush off. Berlin's son doesn't really seem to have a motive, The first couple of episodes, he was so against stealing and being a thief, and in this episode, he's kind of just going with it. And why? Again, the shooting and the action was phenomenal. I just didn't have that emotional edge. I wasn't tearing up in the middle of it like I was episode 2, so that aspect it doesn't reach, but still the shooting, the action scene was awesome. It's nice to see the professor back in the game. I mean, actually using his skills to pinpoint where the gang and the military is at once and sort of telling them what to do and telling them to run to different parts and all these different things, even though the professor isn't even there with them. He just looks at the map and talks in the walkie-talkie. It's just so cool to see, and it's so well written. That's why people love the show, right? So that's awesome to see. Alicia wasn't really a big part of this episode because she just had her baby, and I think she didn't really stop the professor for 2 reasons, right? One, the professor was telling her all this time that the government's skewing her name, they're not on her side, and now that they helped her have this baby, and now that they're free, they're not turning on her, I think she realizes they were right, maybe they aren't the bad guys, And also, she just had a baby, so the whole holdup in the Bank of Spain just seems so minuscule. I'm sure her role will grow big again in part 2. I'd like to see her actually help out the gang and help them escape. I gave this episode overall a week 8. Episode 5. This episode was conflicting for me. At the time, I didn't know how to feel about it, so I didn't rate it. And to this point, I still have not rated it because I just don't know how I feel about it. I guess we should discuss the elephant in the room. Tokyo. Yeah, I was not very happy with this decision. I was okay with every character being killed in the show up until this point. This really, Tokyo's death turned me the wrong way. I mean, you can kill characters if it's the end of the line for them, or if their death is a great sacrifice to save other lives, or if they're just not that important of a character, you can spare them and it still is okay, but you can't kill Tokyo. You can't kill her, especially when the episode built her up to be this survivor, this warrior. The professor said it himself. She is a survivor, and then they just kill her. That being said, with her death came a lot of flashbacks, and we actually got to see some of her first ever encounters with her ex-boyfriend and with Rio and with the professor, which I really loved. Going this far back was actually very, very cool to see. And I'm actually really glad that the writers included these scenes in the final project, even though she died. Anything with Tokyo is a win, so I was happy to see that. I think a lot of the episodes were just way more intense than this one. I thought they were better executed. And then for season 5 part 1 to just kind of end on this sort of unsettling ending where a beloved character just dies, it's kind of sucky. It doesn't make the show any worse. I mean, fans aren't supposed to like deaths, but they're supposed to understand deaths. And this one just seemed kind of not the time. If Tokyo was supposed to die, it wasn't now. Overall, the episode wasn't bad. I gave it a week 7. Alright, so overall thoughts of the season. I mean, it was a good season. It was actually really good. We got to see a Nairobi cameo, which is awesome because Nairobi is one of my favorite characters. Looking back to that scene where her and Tokyo talk about what happens after death, that was a clear foreshadow to Tokyo dying, and I just didn't see it coming. I also noticed that there was no Bea Chow song. Come on guys, if there was one time to use Bea Chow, it was for Tokyo's death. Tokyo's death would have even been almost okay if you just used Bea Chow. I'm really hoping they pull it out in part 2. I thought the acting was top notch this season. I mean, the acting was just something else. I think The professor was more of a professor. He was more just very straight to the point. I thought Alicia's acting was so good. I mean, whenever she was in the professor's presence, she just had such a menacing stance. She owned the scene. I thought Arturo and Denver's clashing dialogue and yelling and arguing at each other was super heated and super good acting. The cinematography was increased. Some of the shots were just so good. When they do have a really cool shot, you know, you have to give it to them. You don't really see a lot of that in the first 4 seasons. The music was intensified this season. A lot of like similar sounds from other seasons, but they were more like trappy, kind of, if that makes sense. There's also just some new sounds that I thought were perfect additions to this show. I think if I had to take one thing away from this season is that it's very different. There's a lot of new things, and a lot of these new things were very, very good. The flashbacks were super cool. The music was super new and unique. While this season is very different from past seasons, and in some ways it's good, it's also kind of bad in some ways. So much of this season just felt kind of out of place. Although the backstories were cool, they were just so random. Like why are they here? We don't need to know all this. Tokyo's death felt out of place. The random characters falling out of love felt out of place. I felt like there were things from season 4 that were just forgotten. I mean, Tokyo and Rio were fighting, and Denver and Stockholm were fighting, and then they just kind of make up out of nowhere this season for why? Freaking Arturo totally sexually abused a girl, and that just isn't mentioned this season at all. Like, why include that if there's no reason for it? There was just so much more fighting this season and less of the heist, you know? In a show that's called Money Heist, why is there so little heist this season? Season 5 stepped out of its comfort zone a lot. Overall, it's good, but there's no denying that part 1 got off to a little bit of a rocky start. And some of the times it stepped out of its comfort zone, it stepped a little too far. And it just needs to dial it back and sort of come back to its roots. And that would be my main gripe with the show. So even though the show felt a little bit awkward or a little bit out of place or just random at some parts, I thought on a larger scale, almost every aspect was intensified. Things that were already great in the first 4 seasons were made even grander, even bigger, even bolder, even better. And for that, I gave the show a weak 9. The season was very, very good. Just some awkward parts is my takeaway. So yeah, there's my review of Money Heist Season 5 Part 1. Let me know what you all think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I know my Office episode where I say why Pam Beesly is actually a good character, even though a lot of people think she's a bad character, got a lot of hate in the comments. The people that disagreed really disagreed and really let me know in the comments. So if you guys disagree, please let me know. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, like the video, subscribe for more TV show stuff, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.